Welcome to the Innovating Health podcast. This is your host, Hubert Zajicek. Welcome back to the Innovating Health podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the investment landscape in the startup world. So I'm going to speak to you as I would to my startups when they come to us. And as you know, we invest in healthcare startups at the very early stage. Generally, when a startup comes to us, if it's a digital health startup, they already have some funding on board. If it is and most likely some revenue. If it is a medical device startup, we're likely talking about a startup that does not have revenue yet, but a functioning prototype and a pathway to the FDA. And if we're talking about a startup in the pharma world, chances are we have some animal trials, proof of concept there, but it's super early. So that's understood. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. And of course, the capital needs are going to be different as well. And funding, you need to think about a bunch of different things when you think about funding. It's very often thought of, oh, we're just going to get this done. And you are going to be knocking on a lot of doors to get your dollars, no matter what's going on. I'm also speaking here mostly with an eye towards early stage startup entrepreneurs who are doing this for the first time, or for the first time in healthcare, or for the first time in the United States. So at some level, you don't have an established network of investors that is at the ready for you. You have to go ahead and build that. And of course, that is one of the reasons people join accelerators. People join accelerators because that is just one of the aspects that the accelerator is going to have in its arsenal. A bunch of people, many of whom are just reaching out to us on an ongoing basis to get onto the list of investors to be connected to worthy and good startups. So that's a big deal. When you think about the different versions of types of funding, then very likely people are going to think, oh, okay, well, we're going to just call some venture capitalists up. And I want to go through kind of the pros and cons of all the different groups and also the likelihood of getting funding from them early on. So we're going to have venture capitalists, angel investors, family offices, which sometimes have some overlap. Grants and government grants of some kind are going to be a viable funding source for a lot of startups, or at least for a portion of the funding that they're seeking. Corporate partnerships, potentially strategic investments, are another one, and some crowdfunding platforms. They can take a different kind of flavors of those. And, there's no single solution for every startup. You will find your own path. And also remember that some good things can happen and somebody just gives you money. I mean, it doesn't happen on the subway usually. I don't mean it like that accidentally, but you could just happen to meet the right person or the right group early on. And sometimes this is actually a misleading event. So you might then think, oh man, you got it. You just got the touch. And the third meeting you're taking, you're finding the person that's going to hand you the money. Let me just say that it is usually not that way. It's going to be hundreds of attempts to contact investors. And I'm not even counting cold outreach. Cold outreach, you would be probably in the tens of thousands. But so it's direct, targeted, with introductions, potentially hundreds of attempts to get somebody lending you an ear. Yes, those numbers can be different once you're in a certain group, including an accelerator fund that has people who already invested in you, as is the case in Health Wildcatters, for instance. So maybe let's start with angel investors. Angel investors are likely going to be your first source of capital coming out of Health Wildcatters in that pre-seed round. And they fall in a million different categories themselves. And I know I've mentioned family offices earlier. So they're kind of similar, or they can bleed into each other, and sometimes they're completely different. So an angel investor is simply an accredited investor. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you take it with a grain of salt. But it's a accredited investor is somebody currently that makes $200,000 a year in the last 2 years, and with a reasonable expectation of making that much money this year. So you can see this isn't necessarily a rich person, but somebody who's got the SEC exemption. A second group could be a married couple with a combined income of $300,000 over the last 2 years each, and reasonable expectation of making that much this year. A third exemption or a way to qualify as an accredited investor, which is synonymous with angel investor basically, is to have a net worth over $1 million, excluding the equity of your primary residence. So a lot of people will qualify once they are a little bit older, that are professionals, people are professionals who've made money over their lifetime and have accumulated a little bit of wealth. And that doesn't mean that they would invest that $1 million. That may be all they have. So don't necessarily think that an angel investor is a ultra-rich person. There are other categories of people who have $5 million of net worth or more. So just for you to know, an angel investor is not necessarily someone who's driving around in Lamborghinis. So this is where it's very personal. By the way, it's always going to be the persons involved. They care about you and you care about the individual persons involved, whether it's a venture fund, a family office, an angel investor, the people that run the granting organizations. It's always going to be about people. But as an angel investor, you can find many different angles. It could be, in the case of health locators, actually healthcare angel investors, which is a subcategory of angel investors. Many, if not most, angel investors don't even touch healthcare. And many, if not most, well, definitely most angel investors don't want to invest in something that's pre-revenue or not break even. I know that sounds crazy, but people who are investing in a car wash or in a coin laundry or things like that are also angel investors. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just investing because they want to have some cash flows. They're still risking their hard-earned capital, but it's not necessarily somebody who's willing to really, really risk their capital. And then when you get into people who are willing to invest in true startups, then you'll have people who invest in things that are more broader appeal, healthcare being, a little bit of a niche and additional risk. And so in Health Locators' case, the couple of hundred angel investors that have written us checks over the last 12 years would fall into the category of being willing to make investments in an early stage healthcare startup. But you can go to angel groups and you'll find people who are, a subgroup of the angel group might invest in healthcare deals. There are a few angel groups who are healthcare only or healthcare first, and they're pretty special also. But just know that it's not one game. There are also angels you can find online. There are groups online like Angel List and others, where you can find where Angel MD or Gust, where you can find angel investors. But usually angel investors want to have the personal connection, and there's a huge advantage if you're in the same hometown. It's not a must, but it's going to be a big advantage. Angels generally shouldn't lead the round. There are exceptions to this rule, but you're probably best off with having a convertible note with angels, unless you're dealing with an angel investor group or some group that's more organized that can round up a lot of the capital for you. But it's best to just have somebody else lead the round and let them go along, or have an angel group lead the round that can really, really work to your advantage. And there may be odd connections. Somebody may be interested in if you're addressing a certain disease state. Well, this may be a family that's afflicted by that or by something that is adjacent to your field, and so therefore they are willing to invest in something that's high risk in that field. It could be any kind of disease or genetic disease or other disease. So know that that's something they will do. So find somebody who's got a passion around your topic, because these people are interested in moving the ball forward. They certainly want to know a little bit about your area where you're going to have an impact, but just know that impact is going to matter to them a bit more than for other investors, because you're dealing in healthcare. Family offices are, once again, this is a term that catches everything from an angel investor who decides to invest on behalf of his family or her family to literally multi-billion-dollar groups that are managing the money of billionaires. So many, many different categories, many, many different outlooks, many, many different ways of how they may have made their money. Something to think about there is to look at their investment thesis and what they're interested in putting their money in. They may have several buckets. They may have more leeway than a VC, because the family can decide, we want to invest in that, even if it didn't show up on their website even. So there may be personal reasons why they might get involved in it, or opportunistic reasons. They say, yeah, we have some cash, we're interested in this space, let's go. So that's pretty cool. Do understand that everyone has their return expectations, angels, family offices, and you're well advised to find out what they're looking for and to see if you can fulfill these criteria. So family offices sometimes can also be found at family office summits and in other kind of groupings, and wealth advisors sometimes also know family offices that have a certain interest in a certain arena. So it's good to dig in on who might have an interest in investing in your startup for personal reasons, for professional reasons, for family reasons, and that could suit you well. Family offices, of course, because of the difference from a couple million to billions, could write any size of checks. That's going to be totally dependent on who you're talking to. So I would say do your homework on that. And this is just an overview of this topic. So let's go into VCs. So venture capitalists. Now you're dealing with a group of people who are literally hired to make these investment decisions, and they have a fund that they have raised from others, and they are interested in making investments in a certain area. So they will have written a document that tells and you should be able to find that on the website, tells exactly what they are interested in investing in. And they have a portfolio that you can research, because with the other two groups you can't. And you can find ways to find people who may have an interest in your type of technology or your type of startup. So venture capitalists are also going to be approaching the subject with primarily a focus on the returns. They can be extremely well-connected people. They can have a huge impact on your startup. So think of them as super value add-on investors. But, they will approach this as a business. Their job is to extract the maximum amount of value. And the smart ones aren't going to forget about the fact that they want to be in the right deals. So don't worry too much about how tough it might be to negotiate with them. Not necessarily a big concern in many cases. If it's the right deal for them, they'll do a fair deal with you as well, but they're going to be a lot harder, and they're going to have a lot more established criteria around what they need out of you. They will probably want a board seat. There's going to be certain minimum requirements they have. With that comes too, though, more obligations. They're willing to probably help you find the rest of the money. They're willing to syndicate potentially. They're willing to open up the Rolodexes. They are aligned with you, and that is their profession. So there's a big advantage in that. Listen to the reputation venture capital firms have. Some have a good name, some maybe not so good. But it's important to listen, potentially call a couple of entrepreneurs who've gotten an investment from that venture capital firm. Remember, when you're getting investment from someone, you're likely going to see them for the next 5-10 years. And as your startup grows and as you approach an exit, so these are people you're going to be close with over these years. So make sure that you're well aligned and that you understand what it is they're looking for, and also that you think there is a cultural fit between you and them as well. Quickly on government grants, there will not generally, this will be SBIR or STTRs or other grants like that from NIH, from NSF. There are also government organizations, for instance, in Texas, we've got CPRIT, which funds cancer startups. So there are many different kind of government, state, local, and federal groups that will fund startups. Generally, they will not, their monies are to be used for research purposes, development purposes, and you won't be able to raise all your money from grants. But investors love it when you bring these non-dilutive funds on board. And many different flavors of such. And so pay attention to that. This could be a really big win-win for you. The lead times with those type of grants are 6 to 9 months. So just know that if you're looking at writing, that's from submission. So when you're writing it, by the time you submit it, it'll take a half a year plus to get the money, if you get it. So really good to do your research, look into groups that might be able to help you with writing the grant or stack the deck in your favor to be successful. And there are organizations that can help you with that. And our startups work with several such groups to make sure that they optimize their time and effort with grants. So it's a big deal. A lot of investors will think highly of you if you've raised some grants as well, some grant funding, because to me as an investor, it shows me that you're not leaving any stone unturned and that you're going after the capital when it's out there. And we all know there is a good chunk of capital. By the way, it's quite good in Europe too. There's a lot of grant funding for startups in Europe. In some cases, it is hard to find the bridge between grant funding and venture capital because there isn't as much venture capital over there, and US investors are less likely to invest in European or other startups that are not in the US. Corporate partnership, real quick, or strategic investors. You got to be really careful with those to understand what it is you're aligned around. It can be a really great symbiotic relationship for both organizations, but beware of anything that locks you into an exclusive relationship or even a first purchase opportunity for that organization. Because once you're talking, let's say, to company B, let's say A was your strategic partner, you're talking to company B, and company B says, do you have any exclusivity with A? And you say, no, I don't. It's just that if I have any deal, I gotta give them first dibs. Guess what company B is going to do? I'm going to spend the time to do the due diligence on you just for the company A to take my deal and then take it themselves. So it's not so much that it's a bad deal for you to have such a relationship, but if a term like that exists, then more or less nobody else is going to be looking at you because they don't want to be doing the work just for you to then have to turn around and let them, company A, decide first. So nobody wants to. So it's kind of a weird way to think about it, but it can cost you. It doesn't seem that way, but it can cost you your ability to be funded by anybody else. Also remember the ulterior motives. With a venture capitalist, an angel investor in a family office, they have a profit motivation that is attached to your success. Your company is successful, has a successful exit. They're happy, you're happy, everything's good. With a strategic, remember that it wouldn't be in their best interest to acquire you at the highest possible value. So it's a trade-off. They might be able to help you to get there faster, but then give you opportunities to purchase you or interest in purchasing you along the way, which isn't a bad thing in many cases. Just be aware of it. They wouldn't be incentivized to do that. Also, know that they have probably developments like yours in the pipeline themselves. And so, most will be very, very buttoned up around making sure there is no crossover between their R&D side and your proprietary information. But, stuff happens and it can get dicey. So be very careful, have an attorney on board that knows how to write these contracts and so and go into it eyes wide open. Again, it can be a wonderful thing, but a little bit more careful on that one. Crowdfunding platforms, have bobbed around for a while and can be a good fit, especially for anything that's consumer facing, which in healthcare isn't the majority of deals. Also, when you're looking at the cost of capital, right? So it's always important to say, how much do I spend to get the dollars in? I mean, you could, just like when you run ads to promote your whatever it is you're selling, you're gonna have to spend $30 on the dollar to get your money in. So with a crowdfunding platform, you're gonna have to run ads. You're probably gonna want to deal with a specialized organization that does well with these. So before you know it, you're spending 30 cents on the dollar to get your investors in. So when you're dealing with an investment banker, you might be dealing with 6% or 7%. Just know it's a potentially fairly dear money, that you're spending quite a bit of money to get more money. And while that can be the right move, or maybe yours goes viral and you don't have to spend anything, it's really hard to plan to go viral. So don't count on it. It can be kind of a catch-22. I think these are things to take into consideration. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other important things that you could look after, but these are the top groups we're looking at when we're talking to our startups. Nobody has all the answers. I think here are a few things for you to take home with you. I tell this all my entrepreneurs: you got to be out there to meet the right people. So commit yourself to go to one event, some sort of networking event every single week at the minimum. If this is your business and this is what you do full time, you need to be out there. You need to meeting people. People need to know you're around. Same counts for your social media presence or LinkedIn or any of the others. You're going to also commit yourself, number 2, to reaching out to a certain amount of people. Don't do mass emails, but say, okay, every day I'm going to reach out. I'm going to research and find 2 people who I will ping, whether those are friendlies, or you're going with a cold outreach. If it's a good fit, a cold outreach can work as well. So hone your message, make it a discipline to reach out to a couple people every day, or have a goal for the week. And then lastly, on pitch events and things like that, attend or participate in at least a pitch event a month. It doesn't have to be just pitch events. It can be for money. It can be for a conference. It can be, so do something that you hold yourself accountable to once a month, where you get out there in front of a crowd. It could be your angel investor. If you make it through an angel investor group, due diligence, it can be that, and you pitch them. But just know you gotta be out there. You gotta be knocking on doors. Yes, you can do a million other things online, but you gotta be out in person as much as you can to make it through. And so these are things you should really take into account and know. And our entrepreneurs know this. You can't expect good things just to happen out of writing a bunch of emails and hoping for the best. So be out there, make it happen. It is a game of numbers. So as quickly as you can, get out there, hone your message, test your elevator pitch, and never look back, right? So nobody gets it ever all right. Don't beat yourself up over something you didn't do right, or you didn't feel good about your pitch. Unless you did it, you wouldn't have known. And so you can draw conclusions, be better next time, and go at it again. So I wish you all the best and in your pursuits. And for now, I'm going to sign off and wish you Godspeed. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Innovating Health podcast. Be sure to follow, give us 5 stars, and subscribe to stay updated to the latest cutting-edge innovations and revolutionary ideas shaping the future of healthcare.